Alrighty, welcome back guys to part 2 of my how to create Rust plugins tutorial series. Please don't mind the lawnmower in the background, there's some guys doing some work outside. In this video, we're going to be covering some basics, broadcasting messages to individual players as well as globally. I'll be explaining game objects, the lists of players, both active and inactive, and how you can use those, as well as the server entity list. And then at the end I'll be going over some timers. But let's not get too deep into that. First things first, go grab yourself a cup of tea or some coffee, whichever you prefer. Pause the video, come back. Now that you got your drink of choice, I'll be explaining firstly where we're going to be working. So for the purpose of this video, we're just going to be working within this initialize method here. So whatever's inside of these brackets is going to execute one time when the plugin first loads onto the server. I'll just make a little note right here so that's easy to remember. So executes one time. So just like we did in the last video where you load your plugin into your server, I'm going to do that right now. So once again, you're going to go to your Rust server root directory, Oxide, plugins, and then you're going to want to go to wherever you are working in your current project, so where you saved your plugin file. In my case, it's in my repos folder. Test Rust plugin, here we go, and test Rust plugin.cs, so that's my plugin. I'm just going to copy and paste that. So anytime that I copy and paste, so anytime you load the plugin, and you see this happen, so it says loaded plugin, test plugin, it actually executed whatever was inside this bracket, but there's nothing in there. So let's put some stuff in there. Unload that. First thing I'm going to show you guys is the server.broadcast command. And this is one you guys are going to be using a lot because it's just a quick, easy command that you can use to print out values or whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to debug something or just like, you know, get some information on something, this is the fastest, easiest way to do it. So you're just going to want to say server.broadcast. And this essentially prints a message into the chat. So let's say hello world. I'm just gonna copy that a couple times. So what I'm gonna do is Control D a couple times, so you can see I'm gonna server broadcast hello world 5 times after the server starts, and that's it. Let's save that. Alright, copy paste this, load it in there, and as you can see, bam, hello world. So yeah, as you can see here, the plugin loads, and it says, hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world, 5 times. And if we unload that and load it again, you'll see it'll do that, the same thing. So, copy paste that in there, does the same thing, hello world 5 times. Another way you could do this is by using a for loop. I assume if you're watching this video, you probably know how to use a for loop, but just in case you don't, I'm going to show you that. So the way you do this is, you're going to basically say, this is the value that I want you to use, and while it's within these certain parameters, you're going to want to print that message. So I'll just show you a quick example. So if you say for, let's say int I equals 0, and so long as I is less than 5, so this should execute 5 times, you're going to say I++. So if you're not familiar with this, what this means, you should probably watch a quick video. This is just a basic for loop. What we're going to do is do that same thing, so server.broadcast, and then let's just do that same thing, so hello world. And sometimes you actually need to use a method like this, because what if you don't know how many times you want it to loop, right? Like, so let's execute that again. Let's make it 10 times. Make it execute 10, just so you can see. Instead of writing 10 different lines, you could just do this. Save that. Unload, load it back in. And as you can see, it just executed 10 times. Alright, so now I'm going to show you guys how to send a message to an individual player. And to do that, we're going to use the rust.sendChatMessage method. So we're going to type rust.sendChatMessage, and we're going to take a look at the arguments here and see what it wants to take as an input. So, as you can see, it's taking a base player as the input, as an input, and a name, and also a string, and the user's ID. So these ones are optional. As you can see, they're indicated by brackets here, so they have a default value. You don't have to input these if you don't like, but you do need to say who you're sending the message to and the string name. For this example, I'm going to send a message to myself. And to do that, you actually need to find yourself on the server and point to yourself. So I'm pointing towards myself inside this method. So what I'm going to say is, so as the first argument, I'm going to say player.find. And as you can see, you can either find by string or ID or IP. So this is a pretty widely used tool. You'll probably be using this a lot in your testing as well. Not necessarily. I guess it depends on what you're working on. But you see here, there's also find by ID, so you can do ID specifically, or you can just do a search generally. So I'm going to do a general search and just say player.find, and I'm going to put in my name. So Slappy _bacon. And I apologize if I ramble. Sometimes my mind kind of races around a little bit when I'm trying to think of what I should be explaining first. But I'm not an experienced tutorialist by any means. Anyways, so here we go. We have, so we're saying rust.sendChatMessage, and we're going to send it to player.find /bacon, and now we're going to input the name. So let's just say name here. We'll just say name here for the example. And then it's going to take a message. So for the message, we'll just say message. Just so you guys can see how it works. We're going to save that. Close that out and reload it. As you can see, the plugin found me, and it says name here, message. So the name here section is actually the sender's name. So if you wanted to say, like let's say for example, there was a cheater on your server and you're like, I want to send that guy a message from the admin and say, stop cheating. You can be like, admin. And then over here in the message, you can be like, stop cheating or you'll get banned. Right? Something like that. So what we're going to do is delete that, load it in there again, and as you can see, it says, from the admin, stop cheating or you'll get banned. So that's just an example of how you can use both of those methods. If you use the rust.sendChatMessage method, so no other players other than who you sent it to will see the message. And if you use server.broadcast, everybody will see. So just so you can see it again, I'm going to close that out, load up the plugin again, and it should say, okay, server.broadcast, everyone will see this, and then rust.sendChatMessage to /bacon, and it's going to say from the admin, stop cheating or you'll be banned. You can totally mix and match and play with these however you'd like. Okay, also, another thing you could do, if you want to make your logo here in the chat, so you see how it has this little default orange image right there? If you want to change that, you can actually define that as a player's user ID, and it'll access their Steam picture. So, let's say that you want to use my Steam picture for that. What you could do is just, let's just copy this again. And say, okay, so this is my, okay, so it's pointing towards me, and I'm just going to say, I want to get my ID. So I'm going to click my user ID here, and then convert that to a string, because it wants it in a string format, even though our user ID is in a U-long format. You can convert them, and it should work just fine. This is actually a terrible method of doing this, though. Because this function right here actually looks through the player list to locate the player with that name, and then once you go over here, it's going to look through it again. So I wouldn't recommend doing it like this if you were trying to make any large-scale projects, but I'm just going to show you that it works, and I'll show you a better method of doing it. So I'll just show you that it works really quick. So as you can see, my image now changed. So that's my Steam picture there. It's a little slap of bacon right there. I'm going to show you a better method of doing this though, and that's just by defining a variable. So because I know that I'm going to send the message to myself, but I also want to access my ID, I'm just going to say base player player, I'm getting ahead of myself here, equals, okay, so the player, I'm just going to say, is equal to this. So it's going to find me, and I'm just going to point towards that player for both of these. And what that does is it makes it so instead of searching for that player here and here, now I'm just searching for it here, and then remembering that. So that way I can say, I can point to it here and here. So it just saves a little bit of processing power. If it was a big scale project though, these would be some things you want to look out for. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Now that we've covered the basics of server.broadcast and rust.sendChatMessage, so you know how to broadcast to the entire server, you also know how to send a message directly to individual players. I'm going to show you guys how to color the text within those messages. And the way that that works is directly in the line of the message, Rust is looking for some text that looks like this. So it's going to say color equals, and then it's going to have a closing /color. So if you're not familiar with HTML, this is really similar to HTML, where you basically say anything within these two brackets here is going to be colored with the color you define. So for this instance, I'm just going to pick a color from this HTML color picker, and this is in a hex format. As you can see, you need to make it in hex format. I'm just going to copy that. So this is a nice 50% blue. Put that in there. And then your message is going to go in here, so I'm just going to say message. And let's just server broadcast that actually. So server.broadcast. Oh. Make sure you put that in quotes so you know it's a string. So it's going to say server.broadcast color equals hashtag 0000ff message color, but this isn't what's going to show up. Let's see that happen really quick. So as you can see here, our message has showed up and it's blue because that is the color we picked. You can do this with any color on the hex. Like, as long as it's in a hex format, you should be able to pick any colors. Should work fine. However, I assume you do not want to write your messages like this. This would be a huge pain in the ass to do. Pardon my language. in a regular plugin, especially like in a large scale, you don't want to be looking at things like this and being like, oh man, that's really hard to read. Like I gotta pick that apart and see like, oh yeah, like there's the message and that's the color and stuff, and there's all these brackets and things. You really want to keep things as simple as possible to make it readable for yourself as well as readable for others, because it's super, super common that you get deep into a project and you don't remember things about where you started. Like, you'll go back and read methods that you wrote last week and you'll have no clue how they work because you've just been working on other things. So it's really important to make things as simple and concise as possible. That being said, I'm going to show you how to write a function which will convert, just you take an input, so a message and the color, and it'll just format the message for you to look like this without actually having to read that. So down here, I'm going to create a method. This method is going to return a string, so we're going to say string. We're going to call it color string. And we're going to take two inputs. So we're going to firstly need the text. So it's a string text. And if you're not familiar, string is just another word for text. They're interchangeable, string, text. In C# you need to write string. And we're also going to take the color, which is also a string. So string color. What we can do here is, this is really simple. So all you're going to want to do is return a variable. And that variable it's basically going to be this. And you're going to want to say plus the color. So you're basically just writing out your string here. You're going to say, all right, plus, and you're going to add that little closey bracket. And you're going to say plus the text. You're going to say plus, and you're just going to put this this closey bracket here. And that's essentially rewriting this so that you can basically put whatever text you want, whatever color you want, and bam, it'll output a formatted piece of text, so you don't have to read that. So let's test that out. Let's just say server.broadcast, and we're going to say color string. Let's just say color B. And then we're going to color it. Let's color it red. Let's duplicate that actually. Say Control D, and we'll make one of these purple. Alright, so now let's test that out again. So let's minimize this and just unload the plugin. Make sure you save your project. And we're just going to copy and paste, load the plugin over there. And as you can see, it says color me, red, red, purple. And if you're colorblind, I'm sorry, but yes, it worked. Alrighty, so now that you guys have got basically everything there is to know about broadcasting messages, you guys will probably be using this a lot for testing things. It's a super common thing. Like, let's say you're trying to just, check the value of something at a certain time and just be like, okay, like I just want to double check that variable's right. It's really handy. You'll probably be using this a lot. So I'm just gonna get rid of all this. Make sure you keep this little color string snippet though. This comes in handy a lot actually. It saves, it just makes things a lot cleaner. Just kind of keep that down at the bottom there. So now we're gonna get into game objects. And there are three main lists of game objects you're probably going to be working with the most. And those three lists, I'm just going to make a little note here. So the three most common lists you're probably going to be looking at are your all player list, which is all players which have connected to the server. There is your active player list. So that is any players which are currently logged onto your server. And there's your server entities list. And just to make it easy to remember, I'm going to write these down at the top here. Because it's super easy to forget, and honestly, I forget these things all the time, and I mean, editing doesn't do justice. It happens. Okay, so the first location is base player, oops, caps lock, base player dot all player list. So this is one list, which you're going to be looking at a lot. Another is base player dot active player list. And the third one you're going to be looking at a lot probably is base entity dot server entities. So these are very common game object lists. So the first one we're going to be looking at is base player all players list. So this is all players which have connected to your server. And just for the example, I'm going to show you guys a quick for loop, because I'm the only player in the server, so I'm just going to make a for loop. So for every player that's just myself, I'm just going to broadcast a message. I'm going to broadcast a message myself. So for, let's make a for each loop actually, it's a little bit cleaner. For each base player, so this is the, so the type and the name of the variable. So for each player in base player dot all player list, you're going to want to say rust dot send chat message, that same thing we did before. And for the arguments, we're going to say, okay, so I want to send a message to the player. So that's this player, whatever player we're looking at currently. So for each player in the all player list, rust send chat message to that player. And let's just make that message, let's make it the player's name actually. Player dot display name. So this is actually a much better example. So this is actually showing how you can use this player object, which is myself, and take a variable from it and print it. What I'm also going to do is duplicate that, and let's print some more variables. Let's see what I got going on here. All right, so let's print my name. I'm going to print my ID. So user ID string. Let's print. Let's see, my health. Sure, let's do that. And let's just do my max health. Sure, that works. And make sure we convert that to a string because it's looking for a string. So it's taking the number value and converting it to a text. That's what this toString method does. It takes whatever number value is here. For example, this is health, and it's going to convert that to a string of text. All right, so let's run that. Let's see how that works. So for each player in the all player list, I want to broadcast my name, ID, health, and max health. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I had my message in the name slot. It probably didn't like that for some reason. So I basically just said, all right, I don't want to include a name, so I made the name null. And then here's my message. So my message is display name, ID, health, max health. And as you can see here, name, ID, health, max health. Really quickly though, I'm going to stop here and make a really quick point, because this is something that took me a while to figure out, to be honest. I didn't realize this was causing a lot of issues. So if you're trying to access a list like this, you have to be really careful, because if you're trying to use values within a list and the list changes, like let's say for example, you're going through the list and you're sending a message to everybody, but somebody joins. So the server is going to modify the list, right? And when that happens, it's going to cause an error, because all of a sudden there's new information in that list that didn't exist, or information's missing from a list that was there before. So it's always a really good idea to just say .toList. And what this does is it makes a copy of this list to memory. so that even if somebody joins, let's say, it's still only going to send it to the original people that it was looking for. So it's going to look for everybody except for that new player that just joined. So this is going to save you a lot of issues in the future. It did for myself at least. So just any lists that are constantly changing, you're going to want to do this and just create a new list with it. It just makes a little copy in memory. But anyways, going on. Let's make a new loop for active players. So we could probably, let's just copy this actually, because this is going to function the exact same way, because I'm the only active player. So if you were to change this to active player list, I guess we could just do this. It's gonna essentially function the same. Bear in mind though, if you are trying to send a chat message to somebody who is not online, it will result in an error, so you're going to want to make sure you're sending it to only people within this active player list. I probably should have said that at the beginning. Anyways, so now that you guys know how the player list works, I'm going to show you guys the server entities list. So for that, let's just go down here a little bit. For this example, let's just say for each entity, if the name contains wolf or something like that, let's print the name of that wolf, or let's print the health or something like that. So for each base entity, because we're going to be looking at an entity here, let's just call that an ent in base entity dot server entities, and let's make that to a list again because it is a constantly changing list. So there's always NPCs dying and being born, and nodes being spawned and whatever. So this entity list is always going to be changing. Let's just copy that to memory. Avoids any errors, makes things nice and simple. And what we're going to do is say if the entity name, let's just say if it contains wolf, then we're going to say server.broadcast, just to make it simple, entity.name. So, really simple loop. So, if the entity name contains wolf, broadcast the name. Simple enough. Let's test that out. And as you can see here, there's a few different things here. So there is a airwolf spawner, whatever that is, and we have 4 wolf prefabs within the map. So those are probably living wolves walking around. Alright, so now instead of just printing the name, let's make it actually print like let's make it print, I don't know, its position or something. So to do that, let's duplicate this line here, and instead of saying entity.name, we can say entity.transform position. Let's just say to string. I believe you can convert that to a string. So now it should say the name and position of all wolves within the map. Alright, like here's this wolf, and it's at, position 396.5, 5.3, negative 159.5, so that's your X, Y, and Z. Alrighty, so that shows you how you can access information from the entities list. Alright, so I'll be going a lot more in depth with this later when we're actually working on a specific project, and just kind of exploring the ways that we can use these game lists, or object lists. For now, let's get into some timers. I'm just going to leave these notes up here. This website, so the UMod website actually has a lot of information on this stuff, so if you're ever looking to dig deeper on something that's a little more specific towards what you're trying to do, definitely take a look on the UMod website, and search through their hooks Definitely don't try and memorize this stuff. Like, if you can reference to things, if you know where to look, you don't need to memorize things. It's not like you're, you know, trying to, like, do some space rocket science stuff. Like, if you can read this stuff online, just remember where to look. Alright, so for this example, I'm going to show you guys how to use these timers. So there are different types here. As you can see, there's a single timer, continuous timer, repeating timer, immediate timer, destroying timer. Oh yeah, okay, so it's just showing you how to destroy the timer. And these all have different functions. So as you can see, this one executes one time after a specified interval. So after 1 second, this is going to execute. Continuous means it will continuously execute until it is destroyed or unloaded, or the plugin's unloaded. Repeating timer repeats a specified amount of times, so every 5 seconds it will repeat this many times. And immediate is the next frame. So this is all stuff you can dig into as well. For this example, I'm just going to show you the single timer and the continuous timer. Those are probably your most commonly used ones. So yeah, let's get into it. So let's just make a continuous timer, and it'll just print how many seconds is going. Timer.every. And it says here, so you put in a float value. So this is the amount of seconds. So let's just say every 1 second. So this is essentially saying, this is the action you're going to want to perform. Once again, don't try and memorize this. You can totally look at it online. And what we're going to do is say server.broadcast. We want to remember how many seconds we've been going for. So we're going to create a float, no, an int. We're going to call that seconds. It's going to start at 0, and it's going to count up every second. So every 1 second, we're going to say seconds plus plus. So what that does is adds 1 second to our variable here, and then we're going to broadcast that. Seconds. Alright, so once again, we're creating a timer. Every 1 second, it's going to increment our seconds variable, and then it's going to print that. And we gotta make sure to convert that to a string. Very easy to forget. Now we're gonna save that and test it. Let's load that up. And hopefully, we will have a second counter. As you can see, the timer is running. And that should stop when you unload the plugin. Voila. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I'll show you guys the timer.ones just to show you how that works as well. But they all work the same way essentially. Definitely spend a little bit of time, or just spend a little timer and just tinker with these a little bit, because you'll be probably using these a decent amount as well. They're not super common, but I mean, depending on what you're doing. Maybe you have a timed game mode or something, and you wanna have, like, you know, maybe a warm-up stage, and then like a fighting stage or something like that, and then maybe like a stage where you view your score at the end, and you want to keep track of how many seconds have been going by. Like, this is just something you could use for that. But we will definitely dig more into that later. Let's get rid of this. I'll show you the timer.once. We'll say after 5 seconds, we are going to broadcast. It has been 5 seconds. Actually, here, let's make a broadcast at the beginning, just so we know when it started. We'll say loaded here. So you can see the plugin loaded, and then 5 seconds later, it has been 5 seconds. And I'm going to conclude that video here, because this is already a lot of stuff, I feel like. We've covered a lot of things, like we got broadcasting messages, we did game objects, and timers. So honestly, like, I would definitely just play around with those a bit. Try to get comfortable with, like, building strings and stuff. I think, yeah, I'm going to call it there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys are still here, holy crap, that is awesome. Feel free to give any suggestions or requests. If you'd like to see like a specific game mode type be constructed, I'll totally like to do that as a project. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good day. And happy developing.